How were the Custodes made using knowledge from the dark age of technology? The Custodes are the Emperor's companions, and each is a unique work of art in creation. So it begs the question, what technology was used to create their powerful bodies? Then around the halfway mark we will answer how and why the Emperor protects them from Psykers and how they are bound to him via their souls. Let's begin. The Custodes are created using tech dating back to the Dark Age, honed by the Emperor to make the perfect counsellors, bodyguards, warriors and executioners. Custodes are taken as infant sons from noble houses on Terra. Why that age? Because the earlier the better. The mind can be altered before it has developed greatly. They are mentally, at this time, indoctrinated. Their psyches rebuilt from the ground up, with each aspirant enduring thousands of hours of such psycho-indoctrination and mnemonic conditioning. They learn every method of assassination, counter-espionage, threat recognition and death dealing known to mankind, but also expand their minds in diplomacy, statecraft, astrogation and interstellar geography, history, philosophy, theosophy, artistry, etc. These changes are worked on their core genetics and in the metaphysical realm of biomancy. The best bit of tech I've seen mentioned to do this would be gene looms. To my thinking, a legacy of the Men of Gold, whose gene tech carries into many areas such as the navigator gene or how the kin of the Votan are made for the purpose of their task, each one given a specific set of traits to suit what they're going to be doing for the Votan overall. Now the loom is mentioned in Inferno, on Terra itself, the seat and capital of that ancient empire and storehouse of its secrets. For centuries such dread secrets slumbered. In forgotten bunkers and armoured vaults lay the masterless gene looms and autosurgical chambers of the dark age of technology. A loom used to be a device used to weave threads or yarn into patterns, and it does the same thing to my mind in 40k, except it's weaving a body with very specific genetics put into it. But what's put in there in terms of the organs within inside the body of the Custodes? In the novel Master of Mankind, we are told the warriors of the Space Marine Legions were raised through a similar process to the 10,000, albeit in cold and crudest imitation. The Custodes had been reshaped at the fundamental level, with perfection threaded through his blood and bred into his bones. In contrast, his lesser cousins among the 18 legions were cut open by knives and implanted with false organs, relying on surgical ingenuity and genetic rituals to mimic the end result of better, more painstaking, more complete work. But what could make these gene changes? Nanotechnology, I would say, and we get a hint of that as Valdor wears his armour. Once donned, the division between armour and wearer was more a matter of semantics than anything else. For all practical purposes, they become one unit, a seamless amalgam of gene-bred muscle and lab-wrought nanotechnology. Custodes are also the receiver of incredible healing factors, which to me also speak of nanotech, from the Master of Mankind. Juhaza had lost half of his face. His features are braided down to the bone. One eye gone, yet the custodian was fighting on. The fact he still stood with these wounds defied reason. Juhaza had no idea he was already dead. When I say nanotech, just to clarify, I mean that's in them doing the repairing on a microscopic level. It could also be something biological in their bodies doing this for them as well. Now to their minds, and for me the most intriguing part. How are their souls linked to that of the Emperor, and what psychic protection does this afford the Custodes? In Valdor's novel, we see him think of his childhood, and yet there were half memories, dim ones, like snuffed candles of the time before. He also remembered what it was like to dream his own dreams, or to feel the hot spikes of jealousy, rage, or avarice. They had become intellectual constructs, these emotions, but still they were far from unintelligible. In rare moments of introspection, he found himself wondering how much he had lost in order to gain the power he had, and whether the bargain was the one he could ever have made himself, given the choice. Such thoughts did not last long. It's like there's something within his mind, or his link to the Emperor, that pulls him back to his mission if his mind strays from its duty. And like his original emotions have been overwritten, he mentions some of them being like intellectual constructs and not things he feels, and the line, "he almost remembered what it was like to dream his own dreams," strikes me on a similar vein. And as further evidence, we see a similar story with another Custodes. It was unlikely Valdor truly intended criticism of the Emperor. It was likely that Valdor or Simonus or any of the Order were truly capable of sustained criticism of him. We are extensions of a single will, Simonus had been told on awakening from his trial decades ago. We are adjuncts, we are orbitals. We are the periphery of the immortal, not its heart. That last line really marks them as programmed but willing extensions of the Emperor. His eternal companions, that unlike the other immortals he coveted, never left him. So now, is their soul bound to the Emperor? A Custodes explains to someone who wants to be one of them from Wolf Time, the most fundamental part of us, the animus, the soul that binds us to the universe, and the custodians to the Emperor cannot be made from a compound in a tube any more than a cogitator can conjure psychic lightning. And so a child must be made with that animus, but that is all it is useful for. And building on that, we're also told about their resilience to Psykers, and it goes deep, from slaves into darkness. 2 custodians stood on the bridge before. They did not flee. There was no bravery in them embracing martyrdom. Their soul had been, like the Emperor, had reached into their minds themselves. And I have a theory how he might have done that, binding themselves to him. Though the minds of the custodians are armoured against the machinations of witches and psychers, they themselves never exhibit such abilities. One thing that might explain that is astropaths, that work under the first and last Lord of the Imperium. They undergo a process called the soul binding. This ritual adds protection to the soul of a psyker. This happens when they show potential to be an astropath. It's said their minds are exposed to the might of the Master of Mankind, and a portion of his essence is said to be put into them, and this gives them more resilience to the warp. And if you're thinking it's only for the Psykers, you're wrong. In Faith and Fire by James Swallow, we are told the first to go through this process was Malcador the Sigillite, the man who, so the legend said, had been the first human being to bear the mark of the soul-binding ritual that forever connected him to the Master of Mankind, the Father of the Imperium. It was written that the Sigillite was one of the most powerful psykers in creation, second only to the mental might of the Emperor. This would explain some of their psycho resistance and how they are so bound to their master's will, not the heart, but the body around it. So in conclusion, I think the bodies of Custodes were made by advanced gene looms, that nanotechnology aids them, linking them to armour and allowing their bodies to heal, and that they are soul-bound to the Emperor, in a version of the process similar to the astropaths and possibly Malcador. This allows his thoughts and will and soul to move through them when he wills it, and they are his men because they are not their own. And this also provides protection against psycho attacks. What do you think to this theory? What are your own ideas? Let's talk in the comments. And if you like this video on the Emperor, try this one.